All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back for another Bokeh Podcast episode. You're hearing the excitement in my voice because I'm geeking out, really. I'm super excited to have Jamenda Whitehead on the show with me today. Jamenda, thank you for making time for all of us.
Oh, no problem. This is an absolute honor for me, so thank you for allowing me to come on the podcast and share a little bit. So I'm excited.
Well, no, it's our privilege, really. And I have to, of course, give context for our listeners. You and I, Jamenda, were having a conversation recently on Instagram, just DMing back and forth. And I didn't know, aside from being a photographer, and we're going to talk about your photography business, but you were actually involved in competitive bodybuilding for some time. Yep. And I was super impressed by that. And then naturally, I wanted to talk about it a little bit. And then, of course, we got to conversation about, well, maybe we could bring this to the podcast. And we're not going to try to encourage everybody to become bodybuilders, but I did want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about what you've learned around the topics of being healthy and strong. And make it relevant, of course, for photography business owners. So that's what we're going to do a little bit later. Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on to do that. But let's actually start with your photography business. And for everybody listening in, you can actually see Jamenda's website. If you go over to jgracedphotography.com, and we'll link to this in the show notes, but it's just like it sounds. And same thing on Instagram. We'll also link to that. Talk to me a little bit about your brand position as a photographer. I know on your Instagram profile, it says Cleveland and Atlanta. Do you kind of move back and forth between those markets?
Yeah, so I'm originally born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And then about 3 years ago, moved to Cleveland for work. And that's actually kind of when I decided to start my business. So I've kind of been, floating back and forth between there. And now with the pandemic being what it is, I'm actually in Atlanta for the time being.
Okay.
I'm just kind of working remote and waiting to see if they're going to have us go back, back into the office. So, but for the time being, yeah, I definitely, have clients in both Cleveland and Atlanta.
So what type of work are you involved in addition to photography?
So I work for American Greetings, the greeting card company.
Yeah.
So I work in their e-commerce division, looking at a lot of their ordering, purchase orders that come in, making sure those are flowing through and handling any issues that may arise with that space. So
kind of logistics management of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Have you been doing that for a while?
Yeah, I've been with American Greetings for about 6 years. So it's been a really good ride. I started out in Atlanta with them. And like I said, just kind of moved through the company. Yeah. And now I'm in e-commerce. That's a really growing market. So it's been exciting to kind of be in that space and as it's learning and growing and booming, just kind of be there for the ride and pick up and learn what I can along with that.
So I'm to that point, I'm just curious, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but having been in logistics now for as long as you have and looking at workflow and figuring out how to make things work as smoothly as possible. Have you been able to take some of those principles and apply it to the way that you run your photography business?
Yes, definitely just making sure that I had a system in place to get from point A to point B, and then constantly looking back. I think that's one of the things that we do in our business. What are those big things that we need to change or optimize? So it's really caused me to take a step back and look at my business and kind of see, what my workflows are doing and how I can improve those. So it's definitely helped in that way.
So when you have conversations with photographers, most of us are not super kind of workflow and systems oriented, right? In fact, that's part of the reason we spend so much time here at the podcast talking about it, because it's not a sexy topic and most don't lean in that direction, but yet it affects our businesses so just at such a large scale. I mean, the freedom, the flexibility that we can have as business owners is maximized via systems and efficient workflows. So what are some things that you've heard in conversation with other photographers that kind of make you tense up a little bit that you feel like, if you just throw one or two ideas out there that you feel like photographers could change the way they're working a little bit for the sake of more efficiency? Does anything come to mind?
I immediately think about just the interaction I had with my clients. I think that was one of the first legit workflows that I put in place for my business. So from the time that I'm reaching out to contact them to the time that I've finished, servicing them the day of for their photo to the time that I deliver their gallery, just making sure I have consistent communication, ensuring that, I know those steps myself and finding ways to automate that, I think, even within it. So I use the HoneyBook customer management system. Yeah. And they have now added those workflows in there. So my next project is to really implement that workflow process that they have to help me, better communicate with my clients, better keep up with where I am in our process and just make sure that we keep that workflow going from start to finish.
Okay, that's huge. And HoneyBook has come up a number of times on the show, and certainly from my experience, having looked at CRM options on the market, last time I did anyway, one of the things I loved about HoneyBook is its kind of simplicity in its user interface, because you can get, for example, and this is totally going to make me look like the ultimate nerd, but I've spent quite a bit of time, and I've mentioned this in the podcast, looking for kind of the ideal task and project management software previously. I've been using Todoist now. It's Todoist for years at this point. But you can spend time looking through all these options. And one of the things that is problematic, I think, at the end of the day, while these tools could potentially help you save time, the last thing you want is so many different moving parts that you just get lost in it. You can't just get the job done. And I love that HoneyBook seems to have kind of simplified the user interface, user experience toward that end. So that's a wonderful thing. Since we're on this topic, I know I'm asking questions kind of out of order here,
no problem.
Talk to me a little bit about time management. I mean, are some of these principles that you already talked about, is that kind of what enables you to manage your time more efficiently, more wisely? Is there another idea that comes to mind?
Yeah, so time blocking and my to-do list are my saving grace. When it comes to like my day-to-day, I have like checklists for work, then I have smaller checklists within that work checklist. And if I find my day kind of getting off track, I tend to just say, stop, let's make a checklist of the things we need to do right now. Like, what are those priorities? Okay. So I definitely live off that. And then time blocking has become really big for me recently. Just making sure that I am finishing my task within a certain time so I don't feel like I'm not wasting time, but maybe procrastinating or taking my time getting something done, knowing that I have to get stuff done, within a certain time period has really kind of helped me stay on track. And when I look back, I'm like, I got a lot done in those 2 hours, where normally it might take, the 5 or 6, because I'm just kind of, wasting my time, and I haven't really set up that time around, how long I have to do this particular project, how long it's going to take me, and then finishing it up. So I would say those two things are big for me.
With that time blocking, I don't know about you, but I can at times get carried away with whatever the thing is that I'm working on. And then I find myself having spent, hours and hours on that thing, maybe in some cases. And then I get frustrated with myself after the fact, because I know that it took me away from working on the other tasks and other priorities that are also on my list. And I can't afford to do that. It's certainly not on a consistent basis, having my hands in so many different things. So have you had similar experiences? And to that end, what do those so-called cutoffs look like? Do you work in hour time blocks, couple hour time blocks?
Right. So I actually have an opposite problem. I wish I could just stay on something like forever and ever. Okay. Mine is more so I might get distracted by something. So it might be the phone or somebody walking in, or I have an email come through. Yeah. And when I know it's like, hey, I have this particular thing that I have to get done within this time period, it helps me stay focused and so that I don't get distracted by those other things. And I'm typically working like an hour, 30 minute to an hour time blocks. Yes. But keeping those distractions away and having that time already set kind of helps me stay focused and get things done. Do you set up like a timer, or do you just looking at the clock? No, just kind of looking at the clock. Yeah. Okay. Because, and I give myself that grace. If I'm going a little bit over, that's okay, but I got the job done, and now I can move on to the next thing. So, it's worked pretty well. And definitely on the weekends, because I know, I don't know about everybody else, I like to kind of sleep in. So once I'm up, I'm like, all right, I have things I have to do within, these particular hour time blocks. So, and then with the to-do list or project manager or task manager, what software are you using for that? Or are you using piece of paper? Piece of paper. So I just have my pad there. And so every week I have, weekly things that always have to be done. So those immediately make the list. Then I have another list of things that might be in progress those kind of interchange in and out each week. Okay. And then at the bottom of that list, I might have like my big things is what I call it. Big things that I need to be just kind of being mindful of, monitoring, or there's somewhere in the process of maybe having specific tasks added to that other weekly list. And so I'm just kind of blocking out my task, so that it's not one long list that I have to get done. Yes. And then with that, I can go in and kind of prioritize which ones need to be done, what needs to be followed up with. And then, like I said, if I find myself really distracted or I feel like I'm not getting anything done, I just take a minute, whether there are 2 or 3 things off this list I need to get done within the next 2 or 3 hours. And that kind of helps recenter me, bring me back, and allows me to kind of focus on what I need to get done in that moment. All right, so I want to transition back to what's normally our first question, and let's talk about brand position. We were going to talk about your photography business, and I'm actually on your Instagram page, and it says
grace my lens and I'll grace your memories. Would that be the summation of your brand position, or what is your brand position in the Cleveland, Atlanta markets?
Yeah, so that's definitely kind of like the summation of it. But it's this idea that like I've been graced with the opportunities I've had in life. I've been graced to find what I'm passionate about and what I want to do. And so I'm absolutely honored whenever, clients choose me as a photographer and they come and grace my lens. And then on the flip side of that, I want to give out a little bit of that grace, give that back in some way. And so I want that time that we spend together to be graced. So whether it's making you feel really comfortable in front of the lens or really hyping you up during that moment, while I'm having those, your photographs taken. Or it might just be finding some little way to give you something that you weren't expecting. As a way to kind of grace you and grace our time together. So,
talk to me about that word grace, because my understanding of it, having come from a very religious background, it centers around religious concepts or religious principle. But is that the case in this scenario, or do you find the word, define the word in a little bit of a different way?
Yep. No. So it's I guess it's pretty much the same. It's almost like a play on words. So I look at the word grace as something that a gift that you don't deserve, right? And so we're graced with photography. We may not have had it years ago. We have it now. It's a gift. We're graced with these memories and this time that we get to spend with other people that we might not otherwise get. And I consider myself to be in almost like a constant state of grace.
Yes.
So being able to give that back and have those interactions with other people is just my way of being able to, share what I've been given and give it back. So.
That's an interesting, and this could be a deep hole we could jump into, but just for the sake of conversation, I love, first of all, I have a lot of respect for your attitude as it relates to this idea of grace. You talk about grace as something that we don't deserve. And that having that kind of mindset in general, outside of basic human rights, I think our American culture has gotten, at least in years past, and I think even now in some ways, a little obsessed with this idea that kind of everything is a right. And I don't personally subscribe to that mentality. And I think part of what that enables for me is a certain amount of gratitude, an underlying gratitude for what I have. Certainly, as you were talking about, for the clients that I have the opportunity to work with. Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Yep. Just the idea of not taking any of this for granted. And it's definitely a gift that we get to do any of this, at a higher level. So.
Oh, that's huge. And I think that all of us, first of all, it's a great reminder, and all of us could stand to continue to keep that as a focus, because it would not only, I think, transform our day-to-day existence, living that state of gratitude, but certainly would also translate to an incredible client experience as well, because now we're out of gratitude. We're also trying to create an experience for our clients, which is to go above and beyond what was expected, which is super powerful. And this is naturally a great segue to the next question, which is about client experiences. Is that what your client experience centers around, or is there another big idea at play?
Yep. No, so it's really just finding some little way to give you something you weren't expecting or something that you didn't deserve. For example, I recently onboarded my sister's getting married. And so I recently onboarded her event planner or coordinator for the day as one of my brides. So she found my work. It's like, oh my gosh, I'd love to work with you. She's also, in the wedding industry. And so she reached out and just said, hey, would you mind sitting down with me? I have HoneyBook. I see you have HoneyBook. I love what you've done. Can we just sit down and go through it? So, she's now a client of mine. I'm also able to build this relationship with this person. And then give her a little something that she might not have been expecting. And I'm not going to charge her for it. But it's just that way that I can, go out of my way, help her with something that she wasn't expecting, and increase that, that interaction between us, increase that relationship.
It's interesting how even small things like that make a massive difference. I actually called a vendor or a company, I'll say a third-party company, just the other day. Was dealing with an issue, and first of all, they got on the phone relatively quickly, and it's a massive, massive company. So it's kind of surprising. They got on the phone relatively quickly, and then the person on the phone wasn't rushed. They took their time in conversation with me. And we were probably on the phone for maybe 20, 30 minutes, which again is way more time as well than I would expect from such a large company. But this guy was so chill, so laid back, and seemingly genuinely interested in actually helping me out. And it's funny how even that, I mean, unfortunately in some cases, but even that feels like something extra. But I think it's also a good reminder too, in that if we are willing to just go the slightly extra mile, it can make a massive difference in the customer experience. It's a little bit more than what they were expecting, but even that little more can just bring a smile to their face.
Exactly. Yeah. And and I find it's never the same for every client. So, it may be a couple extra images here or just making you feel really special during our session there. But I'm constantly trying to look for those ways to do that where they might not be expecting it.
That's cool. All right. Well, we're going to change gears here again and actually go back to time management, because I didn't follow up my question about time management with the question I ask a lot here on the podcast, which has to do with delegation or outsourcing. And, it's a funny thing, actually, for everybody listening in. You're probably used to using the word outsourcing specifically as it relates to editing. We somehow almost made those words the same. Outsourcing just automatically meant outsourcing editing over the years in our photography industry. But outsourcing as a general concept really is delegation, right? We're handing a particular task or set of tasks off to someone else, an individual, another company, whoever it might be, to handle that work for us. Is delegation a concept, a principle that you've implemented in your business, and have you had any success with it?
Actually, yes. So I actually have used the photographer's edit.
Oh, nice. Shout out.
Yeah. Small plug there. For some weddings that I had last year and coming into this year into wedding season, I plan to again, had a really great experience with you guys. And
awesome.
It completely took the pressure off of me as I was kind of running into a deadline with one of my brides. And she was like, when will it be done? And I was like, let me get this out, send it to you guys, got it back within I think a week, maybe a week and a half tops.
Yeah.
And it saved me so much time. So we'll definitely be using you guys again. So that's that one place where I'm like, I will probably be outsourcing more of my editing.
Oh, that's cool. This is totally unexpected that we go here, but since we're here, for everybody listening in, photographersedit.com. If you don't delegate or outsource your editing, go check it out. Okay, keep going.
And then the other piece for me is I'm in the process of growing and scaling my business. And I have learned very quickly, I am not for the books and the numbers and all of the things around the finance piece. So I'm definitely looking into, as I'm growing, how can I find someone to just make sure that that's taken care of for me? I want to go out and shoot and enjoy my clients and have those interactions and not be so worried about the back end. So I'm definitely, as I go into this year and looking to grow, to find those resources where I can kind of delegate that to someone else. So,
and in an ideal world, you wouldn't just find somebody that's a bookkeeper, but an accountant, someone that can lend some suggestions, some ideas as to how to look at the numbers. It's super powerful. I'm very, very much with you. Despite the work that I've done to improve my mentality and approach to not just finances, but numbers in general over the years. And it certainly has had its payoff. I still am with you, Jamenda, in the sense that I don't naturally lean that way. And so, and in fact, in many cases, there's a certain amount of apprehension or fear associated with it. So having somebody on my side who can help kind of guide me through that and give me insight and help me make the best choices possible, and of course do the obvious things, which would be to find all the write-offs and so forth. That makes a big difference. So I really hope that you can find somebody helpful like that. And for anybody who's in the Cleveland or Atlanta area that might have a reference, make sure you DM Jamenda and make the suggestion, because that'll be huge. I love that you're thinking about that.
Yep.
How long have you been in business, by the way, in your photography business?
Going on 4 years now.
Okay. Which is, and the reason I ask, or part of the reason I ask anyway, is that I think back, and I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but if there was one thing that I wish I had approached differently as a photography business owner, and certainly early on, kind of like you, I mean, only 4 years in, it's great that you're thinking about this. It would be to have proactively gotten help with the financial piece of it, because it just wasn't a strength. I didn't have training there. My upbringing, my dad tried to help kind of form a certain perspective around finances, but they certainly didn't have much money. In fact, when I got married at the young age of 20, my parents paid $600 for the wedding photographer, and to them that was a lot of money.
It's a lot, yeah.
So that's kind of the world that I came from. So I start getting these checks for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. That's such a foreign concept to me. What do I do with that? How do I manage it? How much do I set aside for taxes? And then not only that, as I ideally am inputting numbers into QuickBooks or comparable software, how do I look at those numbers and make intelligent decisions for my business? Like that kind of stuff. Oh, if I had only known early on, I'd be in a much, much different place, certainly much sooner anyway, than what I was ultimately able to achieve. So I love that you're doing that. I highly encourage everybody to do the exact same thing. That makes a massive difference.
Definitely. I would say for me, I know my mom has always been really big on the business side of things.
Okay.
And I just didn't get those genes. I just didn't. So I have some general principles, that I understood that she did coming up with her own finances. But overall, there's so much more to it when it comes to running a business and becoming an entrepreneur.
100%. 100%. Look at the numbers, everybody. Look at the numbers. And again, not just the finances, but look at the other data as well, whether it's analytics in your website, looking at sources of business, looking at where the majority of your business revenue is coming from, where the biggest expenses are, looking at the numbers, it just makes you a more intentional, more proactive, and just all around better business owner. Make sure you do it. Good reminder. Let's talk about books. Is there an impactful business or self-help book that has made an impact? I guess I said impact twice now. Has made a big difference in your life, whether as a business owner or just an individual.
Yeah. So I actually read The Power of Habit. I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah.
By Greg Duhigg, I believe is the way you pronounce his last name. And it was just a really captivating read for me, hearing about the different stories and movements that kind of occurred due to these little small moments. And from there to then how your mind kind of processes things and how it creates habits and how you can break those habit loops. And it kind of just constantly comes up in my life as a reminder to say, if I find myself drifting either off the beaten path from my habits that I, want or intend to start and remain constant in my life, I have to be very aware of the things that may break those patterns, may break those loops, so I can get back on track. So I think for me, that's a book that's constantly coming to mind. I've shared stories with my sister and my brother, and they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. But just the concepts from that book have just really helped me to kind of, once again, if I stray, get back on track. If I'm trying to form a new habit, these are the things I need to be mindful of, just making me more aware of, how my mind works and how that impacts, my day-to-day life even.
That's good. Yeah. It's like a system, speaking of systems, a system that kind of keeps you in check. Mm-hmm. One of the things that makes a big difference for me in that regard is I literally have my list of values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I should know that number by now, but 9 values on, I'm counting it here on the lock screen of my phone. And these are principles or ideas that I'm striving to live and exude and demonstrate in my life consistently. Mm-hmm. And that it's nice to just have that front and center all the time as a kind of a check and balance, like you're talking about. This book, for everybody listening, and we'll link to it in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com, The Power of Habit, by Charles Duhigg. It is a bit of an unusual name. It's hard to know exactly how maybe you pronounce it, but The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And that's an interesting one. I don't think that's been brought up on the show before. So we'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
Yes, a good read. It was definitely, like I said, captivating. It wasn't just, do these things. Just a lot of really great stories about how things got started because of these small actions. They kind of all added up. Yep. So. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. We're going to link to that in the show notes. And by the way, for everybody listening in, if you go to Bokeh, Bokeh, bookshelf.com, there's a resource that Haley put together for us some time ago it's basically a collection of the most popular books that have been mentioned here on the podcast and coming up on close to 500 episodes. Make sure you go take advantage of that. If you're looking for a book, you can check out the one that Jamenda just mentioned. You can also go to bokehbookshelf.com and check out the most popular recommendations there as well. Let's get into our main focus today, which this title or the title for this episode is likely to be something like How to Build a Stronger, Healthier Body. Because, at the end of the day, most of us probably aren't going to try to be bodybuilders, but I still have to say, and I don't remember exactly the words that I used in response, but when you first told me and then shared a picture, like it was a stage picture. In fact, I posted it to my stories today of you competing as a bodybuilder. I was like, my word. I was so impressed and then kind of intrigued and also excited ultimately to be able to have this conversation on the podcast. But I want to make it clear for everybody listening in, we're not setting some kind of expectation that everybody has to be a bodybuilder today. What I did want to do is pick Jamenda's mind and wisdom and experience and understand a little bit better what it means to be stronger, to be healthier as photography business owners for the sake of our business and ultimately the longevity of our personal lives as well. So before we get into the details, the nitty gritty, talk to me, Jamenda, about how you even got into bodybuilding in the first place. Yeah, so I was a former college athlete. I played Division III basketball at Agnes Scott College. And After graduating, I miss that competitiveness. I miss working for a goal, having practice and just working on that skill or thing that, I was going after. So I tried a couple things. I think me and my siblings, we started going roller skating. So I did that for a while. No real goal in mind. You just kind of go roller skate. And then from there, got into Muay Thai. So I trained for about 3 years. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Like just learning the art and being able to practice the skills and then, get into sparring. And I eventually, wanted to actually have like a Muay Thai fight or a kickboxing fight.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm about 5 feet and maybe 20 pounds too light for most of the people who were getting matches at that time. So I could never get a kickboxing fight.
Okay.
So then I was like, I need something else. I couldn't work towards that ultimate goal in Muay Thai. And then I was introduced to one of my brother's friends. And I've always kind of worked out, been in the weight room, had some general, fitness, I think pretty much throughout my life. And so one of my brother's friends was over at the house one day. He saw me, I saw him. We were like, oh, you look like you work out. He was like, yeah, I do. He goes, hey, come to the gym, come train with me and my coach. So I was like, okay. I'm thinking, people go not hang out at the gym, but you go meet people, you work out a little bit and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, he told his coach about me. So when I got in there that next week, we immediately started talking about, I heard you want to do a show. Do you want to, you want to do this bodybuilding show? There's one coming up. And I immediately jumped on the opportunity.
Really?
To really just kind of push myself to that next level and see what I could do. And there was a new goal set. And I think that was what I've been missing, was having something that I could work for and having this end goal that I could really like compete and work towards every day. So
my next question was going to be about the motivation behind, pushing yourself. I personally love extremes, and I tend to function in that way, and sometimes to my detriment. But
yeah,
I think it also, the flip side of that, it also enables me to push beyond, at least I would hope so, beyond the so-called average or status quo. My motivations come from a certain place, but what the underlying motivation for you in this case was that desire for competition in the end?
Yeah. So the desire for competition. And then once I got into it, seeing my body change and grow and get stronger, it made me want to chase that next goal, whether it was the rep count or the weight or, seeing, how chiseled I could get my body to look, coming into that show. And I tell people all the time, I've talked to other people who compete or just, work out for anything. I'm cheering you on because it is so cool to see your body change. And I'm always telling people, I know we're not, saying everybody needs to be a bodybuilder.
Sure.
But I think everybody should make it to the stage at least once, just to take your body, like you said, through the extreme to see what you can really do. Because it really is about, pushing your mind and pushing your body to that next step. So.
Yes. Okay. But this is a beautiful segue to my next question, because again, while I very much agree with you and on a very similar page, I know that not everyone is, and our culture certainly isn't. And in fact, our culture is kind of a funny one, right? We tend to go to one extreme or the next. We tend to overreact in a way. Right. And then last year or two, like if you had posted a picture of yourself on stage at a bodybuilding competition, there's a good possibility that you could literally be called out for body shaming. Meanwhile, someone who's obese and lauded for, quote, just being themselves, that's become more normal. Now, I have to add this caveat, and please everybody hear me on this, because I think it's important. The moves that our culture has made in the direction of being more accepting and open-minded to all people, including different body types. But where do you think, when it comes to specifically our bodies and taking care of our health, where is the healthy balance? And I understand this is opinion-driven conversation, but I'd just love to get your take on it.
Right. So I am a big believer of the idea that fitness is relative. It's all relative to what you're doing. As a bodybuilder, I cannot go out and run 5 miles. I don't even want to, Nathan.
Interesting.
But I cannot,
Yeah.
But my fitness abilities is relative to me getting on that stage, to me posing, to me being able to lift my weights. Whereas a person who's going out and running, they're going out and doing that for their cardiovascular health. They're running it so that they can increase their mile times, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas a swimmer might be totally different. So that fitness is relative. And it's more so about finding what works for you when it comes to being fit. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. But everybody should be doing something at the same time, because the other thing that I kind of lean on is that your muscles are the framework for your body. And once you stop using them, you lose them. And especially, I'm I don't look 35, but I'm 35.
You're getting
I've
super
realized,
old, Jamenda.
I feel it. I've had 2 knee surgeries. So,
Yes, I've had 3, so I know it.
Yeah.
I know what that's like.
And exactly. So knowing that my knees are already kind of at the disadvantage as I'm getting older, it's very important, and even more so for me to keep my legs and my quads and my hamstrings strong, so that as I continue to get older, I can continue to have a normal quality of life in a sense. So that I won't have to get, additional knee surgeries later on. So I'll be able to walk up and down the steps. So I've even taken it kind of past just the competition, mindset now, but to say, in order for me to have the quality of life that I want as I continue to get older, it's important that I do things now to help with that. So, well,
you mentioned the word fitness. And by the way, I also want to add the caveat here. Neither Jamenda nor myself are professionals in any realm related to this. This is just conversation. So this is not meant to be professional advice. But when you talk about the idea of fitness, you said fitness is relative. And certainly in the context of what you described, I would agree. Fitness, though, at a very base level, that's an interesting point of conversation, because I think part of the reason why everything is just, quote, okay these days is people also seem to think that fitness is just simply a subjective thing versus let's take a blood test and look at these various markers in your blood, right? There's no I feel this way or I feel that way, though that can play in. At the end of the day, we're simply looking at data. Data really can't be argued with. It is what it is. It's black and white. Looking at that as a baseline and saying, okay, this is good, this is not good, and making decisions based on actual information that is objective, right?
Right.
I think the conversation gets convoluted a lot of times because people are just functioning based on emotion,
right?
And as a result, their health is suffering on multiple levels. As a result, so in your mind, when you say fitness, is there kind of a baseline that you have in mind?
I wouldn't say a baseline, but more so just the idea of, just as I would work at anything else to make it better, I should also be keeping that in mind when it comes to my body. So I need to find something that will allow me to work, practice, and keep those muscles moving, just as I would if I'm going to become a singer or a writer. I'm going to flex those types of muscles to get better at it, to have longevity in whatever it is that I'm taking up. The same way I would do my body and kind of take care of this essentially temple, right? For the long run. It's more so the way that I think about it.
Yeah, when you talk about the long run, it's an interesting thing. When it comes to obesity, for example, I mean, it was mainstream in the news that obesity was a significant factor in how people responded to COVID over the last year.
Right. Yep.
That's you can't argue, regardless of how we feel and how confident we are in ourselves. That's just objective fact, and there are reasons for that. Again, associated with objective, scientific, data-driven, blood-driven information. That can't be argued. And I wish there was a little bit more honest conversation around, and that's one of many topics, to be clear, but around the topic of obesity or cardiovascular health, and inflammation, internal inflammation, how that affects us over the long run. When you talk about long-term health, these are simple realities that, regardless of our feelings, are going to affect our body, and a willingness and open-mindedness to learning a little bit about it for the sake of our long-term health. I think it's super important. I don't want to stand on that soapbox too long, but I feel like it's good, again, for the sake of conversation in our culture, acceptance, open-mindedness. It's good that we, in some ways anyway, that we've kind of gone to the other extreme, but now I feel like we need to come back to a little bit healthier balance, and let's have some honest conversation. It's not, saying, hey, anybody listening out there need to do these certain things for the sake of your long-term, not just health, not just existence, but actually a happy existence over the long run. Here are certain things that you need to do. And it's not a hit on you as an individual or a person. It's just, hey, here's how your body functions. And if you keep doing these things, this is what's going to happen. I hope that we all become a little bit more open-minded. We're able to set our egos aside and be open to that, because it will make a difference. I'll leave it at that, Jamenda. We'll keep going that direction. But talk to me about this, because I know that you competed in bodybuilding for a little bit. You're no longer doing that. What does a workout routine look like for you now as a photographer?
Oh, it's been great the past few months, actually, due to the pandemic. So because I've been back in Atlanta, I've been able to kind of pick back up with my coach and work out with him. So I'm in the gym with him. I'm about 4 days a week now, strictly just lifting. And then on the weekends, I try to get in maybe 1 or 2 days of cardio, no more than maybe 30 minutes a session. But already within the past, I've been with him maybe the last 2 months. I've seen my body, we call it muscle memory, and my muscle memory has kind of kicked in, and I've definitely trimmed down a little bit more.
Sure.
The muscles are definitely like a little bit more prominent than they were before. So it's been absolutely great kind of getting back in there and working with him. And, as I've worked with him, I've learned even more as he's constantly flipping our workout program.
That's cool.
So every day, we're doing 1 to 2 body parts. So we come in and we may do chest and biceps one day, come back the next day, do back and shoulders. But he's going to be flipping either the reps that we're using, the weight that we're using time under tension methods, or, we have to rep and max out. So he's always doing different things to kind of keep our minds guessing, which is something that it's great if you're working out by yourself, but I think sometimes it's very easy to get into the mode of, I'm just going to do these 3 sets for this many reps, just like I did yesterday. And your body quickly adapts to that and doesn't change.
Interesting.
Whereas I've been back with my coach now for 2 months, and because he's stressed my mind, stressed my body a little bit more than I've been able to, since, I really haven't been competing, I've immediately been able to see the changes in my body because of the different types of stressors that he's put on it in the weight room. So it's been, I have absolutely loved it. It's been my a bit of a, not a sacred space, but I guess a bit of that's my time. Like I look forward to going to the gym every day. I make that time. That's part of that time blocking schedule. I'm shutting down from work, at 4:30, so I can go and hit the gym with my coach. And it has just made all the world of difference, even mentally. So we, kind of going back to that, baseline and things that you need in your life. It's definitely helped, I think, even just with the mental capacity as well, just being able to breathe and not worry about anything when I'm in the gym and really push my body in a way that hasn't been pushed. So.
And the level of clarity, you talk about the mental piece of it, the amount of clarity that you can bring to bear for your business, the sake of your business and your life in general, by exercising. I mean, it's kind of a trite word to use, but by exercising, we'll just use that word for now. It is quite significant, and the amount of energy that you can maintain. I mean, diet plays into this significantly as well, but the amount of energy that you can maintain through the day. I'm 41 personally, and frankly, I joke that I'm like 14 in my head, but and I certainly think the mental therein, the mental piece plays a significant factor as well. But if I'm tired doing something, or I'm a little bit slower, or I can't quite lift this much weight, or I'm back to playing soccer. I played soccer up into college, and I'm back to playing soccer again. And if I'm slow or I'm not as quick or this or that, I'm not using the excuse that I'm quote old, because I know I'm not. Certainly in the bigger picture, my thought is, I'm out of shape or I'm out of practice, and what can I do to work on to improve that? It really is a mentality thing in the end. I'm really glad that you've highlighted that. Yeah. But to that end, let's actually talk about for everyone listening in, if they, regardless of the fact that, I guess we're in February now, and this episode may come out in March, but we're a little ways into the new year. Of course, the typical thing to do, I think this year it was a little bit different just because of COVID affecting everything. You didn't see as much posts about, I'm going to do this this year with my fitness. But nonetheless, if our listeners are saying, you know what, I know I need to do something, but I don't know where to start. There's, this ad and this book and this article and this person saying this and do that. I don't know which one to choose. I just need something. I'd love to maybe give our listeners a potential solution. And again, to reiterate what we said earlier, neither of us are professionals in this realm. We're just having conversation here, but a suggestion, an idea. What would the top 5 exercises that you'd recommend somebody do at least 3 times a week to get healthier, to get stronger, to build up cardiovascular strength?
So the basics, and I think at some point we've all seen them or done them, in gym class or something like that. But starting out, thinking about lower body, squats and lunges. You don't need any equipment. You can use your body weight. Over time, you can find weights to pick up, whether that's your child or you have, some dumbbells at the house. But it doesn't have to be very, complicated. I think people kind of overthink this idea of how I need to be lifting or how I need to be doing things. So when it comes to just the lower body and thinking about the exercise, squats or lunges.
Okay, so squats, let's start there. And I'm pretty sure there are kind of different takes on this, but as far as how low you go down, and this, as you pointed out, doesn't have to even be with weights. In fact, having done reps before without weight, I know this can be a super effective exercise. How far do you actually recommend going down to begin with?
90 degrees.
So it's a 90-degree mark. All right.
Yep. So if you have like a little stool or chair, you can, and even if, you can start above there. If you're not there yet, you could use your chair and just kind of stand right in front of the chair, squat down to your butt, just kind of hits the pad or hits the seat of the chair and stand back up. So it's a starting point. But it's something that your muscles maybe haven't done in a while or haven't done consistently for reps.
Sure.
So you're going to stress that muscle, right? And then from there, if you can get down to 90, so constantly trying to work your mind to get to that next point or that next goal, or to stress it in a different way.
Where your quads are basically level with the ground. Now, is there a reason that you wouldn't go past that? Is there potential for injury with your knees, or what's the thought process there?
Yeah, so I think you have to think about your body. So I know for me, we've had knee surgery, Nathan.
Yes.
I'm probably not going past 90. I probably could. But flexibility wise,
okay.
it's never been something for me that I would do.
Sure.
So I think a lot of it's also going to depend on your flexibility, and how low you can go. I know some people who go, your butt all the way down to the ground and then they can sit in that position. That's not me. So whatever you're comfortable at, if it's just, hitting the seat of that seat, or if it's, being able to get down to 90 degrees, I think you're doing good if you can get to that point.
Okay. And then lunges, talk to me about that, what that motion looks like, especially for somebody who isn't familiar.
Gotcha. So with the lunge, you can kind of start out with your feet shoulder width apart.
Okay.
And then you're going to take, let's say, your right leg, and you're just going to step out in front of just take a step right out in front, and then lower your back knee.
Okay.
And that's basically like the lunge motion. And from there, you can either, you're now down in that lunge position. You can bring your back foot up to meet your front foot. So that's coming out of the lunge motion. And then continue that movement with the left foot in front now and dropping the back knee. We call that more of like a walking lunge.
Yeah. It is. It's almost like an exaggerated walk, right? Like a drastically exaggerated walk.
Exactly. Or you could, take that first step out, drop the back knee, come back up, and then just drop that knee back down. And what that's going to do, it's going to stress that quad on the right knee a little bit more.
Yes.
So you're getting just that pump in that one leg. So we call them walking lunges or stationary lunges. You can even alternate that, where you lunge out with your right leg and then push back, then lunge out with your left leg and push back. Just to kind of, once again, different ways that you can do the same movement, but your mind is going to have to adjust each time. So, and that's, I think, one of the biggest principles that my coach uses and that I use is just constantly trying to find ways to trick your mind so your body doesn't adapt and you continue maintaining, growing, or, just kind of staying fit when it comes to those movements.
And these movements are working your quads, your hamstrings, your ass, and with the lunges, the stability. I'm not super technical with this stuff, but like the stability muscles, correct? Like if you're having to step out and then lower down with one leg in the back, one in the front, now you're having to work extra hard to balance, and that's building strength and the stability for people like yourself and myself, Jamenda, with knee issues. It's super
Very
important. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So anything you can do to work your legs one at a time will definitely help as well, because you're always going to kind of be off balance. So one leg is always going to be dominant and the other one won't. So if you can find a way to do those lunges alternating, it definitely helps in that way.
Okay, cool. This is great already. All right, so lower body, squats, lunges. By the way, for those who are listening and kind of taking notes and putting together a plan for themselves, do you recommend a certain number of repetitions to begin with? And I guess maybe just to add to that question, how would you recommend our listeners kind of, gradually scale upward after they get that start?
Yep. So I would typically start out with maybe 3 sets of total lunges. And in each of those sets, you're going to have maybe 10 to 15 reps.
Okay.
So
simple enough.
15. Yep.
I love
simple
it.
enough. And then as you go forward, your body's going to adapt. And in a couple of days or a couple of weeks, your body will be like, okay, I can do this with no problems. I know exactly how much energy I need to exert.
Yep.
And at that point, if it's really easy, once you get to the end, now let's find a way to make it harder. Whether that's instead of alternating my legs, I'm going to do all the lunges on my right leg first. Then I'm going to switch that up, all the lunges on the left leg next.
Yep.
Or I'm going to do the walking lunges, walk all the way down, walk all the way back. Or maybe I'm going to add weight. So I can still do the alternating lunges. Now I may just add 5 to 10 pound dumbbells in each hand and do the weight that way. Or I'm going to hold my kit and do, so there's different ways to take that one motion and find ways to keep your mind guessing how you're going to do it, how you're going to execute it, so we can continue to grow and adapt.
Perfect. Okay, this is so good. All right, so we started with lower body, squats, lunges. What's next? What comes next?
So then, push-ups. Okay. It's a great workout for your shoulders, chest, and your arms in general. You can start, if you know how to do the regular push-ups, start in the plank position, and just kind of lower your arms right back up. If you can't do it, from that full plank position, you can start from your knees. So there's so many different ways that you can, you don't have to do the full thing. You can work your way up again. And then there's variations to the push-ups. You can, you have the normal plank position, but if you put your body in you can imagine like an A-frame where your butt's kind of in the air.
Okay.
That's another way that you can actually do that push-up where now it's targeting more of your shoulders.
Yeah.
They call it like an A-frame push-up. From that position, just hold a plank. So if you can't even do a push-up, get in that plank position and just hold it. It's going to work on strengthening, the upper bodies and the arms and the shoulders in that way as well.
And the core.
So that's another, the core is huge for the push-up.
Oh.
So it's definitely going to work on that. Yep.
It really, I think that's a great place to start. When if for somebody who can't do a push-up or maybe can only do one or two, just being in that position, arms extended, whether in that A-frame or just, body level with the ground, arms extended, and just staying in that position for, try 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and build up from there, and intentionally tighten your core. That it is amazing. People think that push-ups, you got to do, or rather sit-ups, you got to do sit-ups to get to, build up your abs. And certainly they can play a role, but planks are just incredibly challenging and ultimately a really, really powerful exercise.
Right. The longest minute of your life is what I call it.
It's true.
That's what it feels like.
Let me ask you about push-ups, because something that I've heard or read over the years is about the actual position in which you put your, not so much where you put your hands with the push-up, but how you extend or don't extend your elbows. So I think traditionally, I say traditionally kind of in quotes, but in years past, it was commonplace, like even at school, right? When you were supposed to do exercises in PE or whatever, you did these push-ups and your elbows were kind of sticking out almost like at a 45 degree angle from your body. And my understanding is that can actually be detrimental to your shoulders. And so I've since, because I do push-ups regularly, I've since brought my elbows in and do them almost parallel with my body and push that way. Do you know anything about this? Can you comment on it?
Yeah, so I think once again, it's all about knowing your body.
Okay.
So if you know you're prone to shoulder injuries, shoulder problems, I need to alter the way that I'm lifting.
Okay.
And the other principle that my coach really works off of and that I've adopted is there's always a different way to hit the muscle. It may not be that way. So people still do, the 45 degree angle where the elbows are kind of out. They do the push-ups that way. Yeah. You can also bring them in really close, but what you start doing is you're hitting more of your tricep then.
Got it.
Whereas that wider stance is going to hit more of the chest and the top of that shoulder.
For sure.
That front delt. So once again, I think it really depends on, what your goal is and knowing your body and what your body can and can't do, what your flexibility is in that moment.
Speaking of flexibility too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but one of the things I fractured my wrist pretty badly playing soccer years ago. And so I don't, and actually crashed my motorcycle not too long ago as well. So I have some issues with my wrist. So instead of that typical position where my hands are splayed out, resting flat on the ground, what I actually do is I'll use a dumbbell or set of dumbbells, and I'll just hold onto the dumbbells and push off the dumbbells. Yep. Your thoughts on that as far as flexibility, those who may not have as much flexibility in their wrist?
Yep. So I think that's perfectly fine. If you can't get it in that way, there's always another angle to kind of hit that muscle. So if you found that you can hold the dumbbells and do it, perfectly fine. You're still getting the movement in. You're still kind of targeting the muscles. It may just be at a different angle or a different part. Like I said, if my arms are out wide, I might be hitting more of the chest and the shoulders. Whereas the closer I move in, or maybe if I'm angling with my wrists and my hands are kind of pointed more towards the ground, it may just be hitting a different area in that region. Okay,
fair enough. And then as far as kind of a build up, I know you mentioned already starting in your knees. If you don't have a lot of upper body strength, you could start it in your knees. You could even just start with a plank. And then as far as repetitions, what would you recommend getting started and then working up to?
So the same thing, you can start with the 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps.
Okay.
So if you can get 10 reps really easy, you should probably go ahead and go to 15. You know, if you can get 15 easy, you know, so it's all about really just being aware of what your body can and can't do. Because it's so easy for us to just be like, I'm just going to do my 15 reps and that's it. You could probably do more. And if you find yourself getting to that point, bump it up a little bit. Give yourself a little bit of a challenge. But I would definitely say that, you know, 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps to start out is a great starting point. And then from there, see how you can play with the hand movements to make it a little more challenging.
And speaking of, I know that it's easy doing a push-up to kind of bounce, right? Like you let yourself down, you just kind of bounce off the bottom and come back up, and moving really quickly like that. I feel like maybe the push-up is compromised slightly. Do you recommend a particular, like a second or two down and up, or how do you approach it?
I think it just depends on what your goal is in that moment. So if you're just trying to get the push-ups in, if you need to bounce to start, that's a good starting point.
Okay.
But then as you get better at it, that's yet another way that you can kind of play with how challenging it's going to be. So instead of just allowing myself to bounce over time, I may lower, you know, push up and then on a 2-second count, lower myself back down. Or I don't let my chest touch the floor on the way down. You know, that's another thing. If I need to push up and then come all the way back down. So there's just so many different ways to kind of play with the movement itself to make it work for you. But the important thing is that you keep kind of building on it. So I'd say for me, I'm going to have like a pretty steady tempo where I'm just kind of, I'm up and then I'm down and then I'm up and then I'm down.
Sure.
Whereas my coach might come in and say, I want a 2-second hold at the count.
Nice.
I mean, at the top of the movement.
Yep.
Before you come down, you know.
It's interesting. And again, I relatively limited knowledge, more of a hobbyist than anything. But one of the things that I heard when it comes to developing strength that plays a significant factor in it is time under contraction, right? So the amount of time that we're spending with that muscle actually contracted or working. And to that point, it is like, for example, you take something like a pull-up. I know that they're challenging. They can be, certainly with lots of reps. But when I see those who are in CrossFit doing kipping pull-ups where they're just kind of bouncing up and down, I'm like, man, it would be really interesting to me to see these same people do anywhere close to the same number of reps, but with a strict pull-up. And we can take it a step further. And something that I used to do is to do like a 5-second count up and 5-second count down. And you may only get 5 reps in, or you may only get 10 reps in. But if you're doing that 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, it is an incredible workout when you just take a little bit longer to do it.
Yep. So many different ways to do it. It's all kind of based on what your goal is.
Okay, so we've got lower body, squats, lunges, upper body, push-ups. What's the next exercise?
I would say just, you know, sit-ups or crunches. So working that core area, very important. You kind of hit it a little bit when you're doing the push-up movement with that plank position, but just really targeting that core area, because it's going to not only support your abs and the front side of your body, but also your back. So anything you can do there. So sit-ups are a great way to do that, as well as crunches. So if you can't do the full sit-up, you can bring your knees up and just kind of bring your elbows to touch your knees to start. If you can do the full sit-up, you know, laying completely out flat, and you can use your arms to help raise you up to get into that, you know, to sit all the way up and then back. And then as you progress, you can just, you know, use your core to help get you up as those muscles begin, you know, getting better and stronger.
Are there advantages to a sit-up versus a crunch? How would you compare those two?
Right. So I'd say the sit-up is going to work more of all of your abdominal muscles. Yeah. Whereas the crunch tends to a lot of times only work like the top muscles. So once again, that progression, if you can start with the crunches, then you can progress to the sit-up and get more of that. If you can't do the full sit-up, you're like, I want to do the crunches, I want to hit my lower abs as well, you can always do things like leg raises. That's another good one to just kind of hit those lower ab muscles there, where you're just laying on the floor, raise your legs up, not too high, maybe a foot or two off the ground. And then you can kind of keep it there and do like a little flutter, or just raise them up and down to kind of hit those lower abs. Yep.
You can get those, you can get that nice little, those muscles on kind of the lower abdomen that are almost like a V shape. You start to do some leg raises and get those muscles built up. It's pretty wild, actually.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got lower body squats, lunges, upper body push-ups, sit-ups, and crunches. I know that you're going to share 5 different exercises. What's that 5th exercise?
So I'd say the 5th one would be tricep dips.
Okay.
Once again, you don't need any equipment. All you need is a chair, the side of your coffee table, your bed. And basically what you're going to do there is you're going to stand in front of your chair, for example, and place the palms of your hand on the seat of the chair. So you're facing away from the chair, out from the chair, and just have your palms there. And then you'll just lower yourself down using your arms and more specifically your triceps. And you're dipping down and then you're just pushing yourself back up in that chair to perform the tricep dip motion.
Now, for somebody that, again, has flexibility issues with their wrists, is there an alternative that gets you kind of comparable results?
Yeah, so you can try different hand placements on the chair, whatever option you're using. So for me, especially, I have weaker wrists, so I don't like to always do it sometimes right behind me, but I might put my wrist out to the side if I can to hold on to the side of the chair versus right in front as another way to do it. You could also take a dumbbell and take it over your head, kind of behind you, and kind of bend at the elbow and just kind of raise it back up there. And that's going to hit that tricep muscle as well.
Cool.
So now, simple exercises. But
no, this is great. I mean, and here's the thing. Simply, I mean, I know you know this, Jamenda, but for everybody listening in, and especially those who are like, I'm not good at getting in there consistently, and then here I am, however many years later, and I've just kind of let myself go. What makes all the difference in the world for pretty much anything in life, at least that's how what I've learned thus far in my 41 years here in the world, is that small things consistently make a massive difference. So if you can show up and do these 5 exercises, which I would venture would take all of 20 minutes to do, but you do it consistently, that and as I suggested earlier, 3 times a week, give your body a break in between, like for a day in between. It's amazing the results that can come from doing something that seems simple as long as you show up and do it consistently. That makes all the difference in the world.
That consistency is absolutely huge, definitely.
Now, talk to us briefly, if you will, about cardio, because while there may be some cardiovascular benefit doing some of these exercises, your heart rate starts to go up. Do you recommend a certain amount of cardio, and if so, what type?
Yeah. So to be absolutely honest with you, Nathan, I do not like cardio, but it is necessary.
Sure.
So I would say, again, 2-3 days a week, if you can, and 30 minutes of the cardio of your choice, is what I'm going to stress there, because, if I go out and I have to run for 30 minutes outside, I'm not going to want to do it again the next day.
Sure.
So I really stress that it's about finding, the type of cardio that you like. Whether that's, I used to do Zumba, loved Zumba. It was great cardio. Or that, maybe a dance class or just going for that walk for 30 minutes.
Sure.
Right now, I love to do like the elliptical that they have at Planet Fitness. That's like my favorite cardio machine right now.
That's so funny because that's the same for me too. Because low impact.
Yes.
I love the one that they had at Planet Fitness. Also, not only does it allow you, of course, to track the amount of time that you're on there, but you can also look at the power output, the wattage.
Okay.
And I'll talk about this here in a second, but it allows you to actually track the amount of power output, which then means that you can very intentionally shoot for a certain amount, right? So instead of just being on there for a certain amount of time, you could say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm putting out consistently 250 watts for the extent of my session. At least the one at the Planet Fitness that I go to, they have it on there. And I think it's super helpful that way.
Yep. So I like to track actually calories. So that's one of the things while I was training for my shows.
Yep.
I might start out, my coach might have me starting out saying do 30 minutes of cardio, but by the time that I'm finished and leading into my show date, I need to burn a certain amount of calories.
Got it.
And there's many different fitness gadgets that you can use to do it. Personally, I find I just want to use the machine that I'm on.
Okay.
And, you can kind of set your weight and things like that to kind of help it track a little closer. But so you use the watts, I use the calories to kind of burn that way as well. So 300 calories is a great starting point.
A good workout. Yeah. Roughly 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more if you're pushing yourself well enough. Yeah. It's funny. There is this particular calorie number, for whatever reason, 294, because I do a 20-minute session.
Okay.
And I actually do high intensity interval training.
You're pushing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing a 4-minute warm up, just kind of easy pace, or even medium pace. And then at the 4-minute mark for 30 seconds, go hard. And then from 4:30 to the 6-minute mark, it's back to that kind of moderate pace again. And then I repeated it again, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and I'm done at the 20-minute mark. And 294 is kind of the spot that I end up landing on, or close to that, pretty consistently. But during the hard intervals, because I know I'm going to get tired, right? And it'd be easy for me to kind of cave a little bit, not quite push as hard on the hard interval. So that's where the wattage meter, that power output meter, helps me because it holds me at kind of a baseline. I know, hey, I need to shoot for a minimum of 400 watts output on that hard interval. And that way I'm pushing myself hard enough. Because if you're going to do interval training, it's interesting. There have been, I think, a number of studies actually over time that have shown the benefits of interval training where you can get comparable or even better, not only cardiovascular, but muscular results, hormonal benefit even from doing shorter, higher intensity interval sessions versus the cardio. There are certain benefits there. And I love efficiency. So I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, I'm going to do the 20-minute session. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to get the results. And I usually do that now at least 3 to 4 times a week is what I shoot for. But that makes a big difference. The other thing that I want to throw out there, and I'd love to get your take on this, I love kettlebell swings. And the cool thing about kettlebell swings, for anybody who doesn't know what a kettlebell is, it's basically a big weight with a loop of a handle. And right now I'm doing swings with 70-pound kettlebells, but you could start with something like a 35-pound kettlebell, for example. And if you're able to even get to 50 swings nonstop, the cardiovascular workout that you get from that, in addition to the core building and lower body muscular building, it is just an amazing workout. You can do it. I mean, 50 swings would take you all of 3-4 minutes. And if that's literally all you could do in a day, it'd be a killer workout.
Yeah, the power output in that is extremely good. I think for that type of workout.
You're right. The power, I mean, it takes a certain amount of power, but then you'll relatively quickly, you'll start to feel that heart rate build up. Right. And you can walk away with, again, just a good all around workout. If you've got a limited amount of time, let's say you only have 5 minutes, if you could get in ideally like 2 sets of 50 swings, or again, to your point earlier, Jamenda, starting basic, do 10 couple sets of 10 swings or 20 swings a piece. And then gradually build up in weight as well, and get to a place where you can do, a couple of sets of 50, maybe even get to the place where you can do 100, and you only have 5 or 10 minutes in a day to get to work out. And if you do that, and you do it consistently, incredible. I cannot recommend it enough. Make sure that you get your form right, and you can find examples on YouTube and such, but highly recommend that for cardio as well.
Yeah, definitely effective. Definitely.
All right. So I want to our last couple of talking points here. I want to talk about diet and supplementation and primarily diet, because that's, I think, and by the way, when I say diet, for everybody listening in, I think in our culture, we've used diet in such a way that we automatically think I'm not eating these things, but I'm eating these things, and it's for a certain amount of time in order to lose a certain amount of weight, and then I go back to quote normal. What I'm talking about when I say diet is simply the way that we eat. And of course, what I'm shooting for, and I'd recommend everybody else shoot for, is a consistent style of eating for the sake of long-term health, and certainly to meet whatever goals you might have for your health. In that regard, Jamenda, I'm curious what you would consider are the most important dietary principles, certainly those that have made the biggest difference in your life and in your athletic efforts.
I think so. For me, I have a couple. The first one is the idea of like snacking versus meals. I think especially as we get older, we have the snacks around the house. They're just there. We have our meals that we're going to eat, and we kind of do both in tandem. So I've really tried to get away from having snacks in my house, whether it's the sweet stuff, but even sometimes like we have the rice cakes and the nuts, which are healthy, but they're still snacks that I'm kind of eating in between my meals.
Sure.
So I've tried to adopt more so sticking to my 3 meals a day that I'm going to have. And if I know I'm going to be doing, have more energy output that day, if I'm going to the gym, or I know I'm going to be doing, shooting a wedding that day or something like that, I may have a smaller snack in between, but really just trying not to allow myself to mindlessly snack throughout the day. So that's really big for me.
That's good. Yeah. When you have that stuff easily accessible, especially the stuff that we all know is not good for us. And
right. I
would say largely these days anyway, it's that food that has high carbohydrate content. And I'm simplifying to be clear, but
right.
As a general rule, if we leave that stuff around, it's easily accessible and we can go to it, we're in trouble. And so I'm right with you, Jamenda. I tend to leave that stuff out of the house. I don't go buy it at the grocery store, whatever they have in the house during the week. I allow, and maybe we can talk about this too, but I allow myself one day where I can have some of those foods and I take in more calories. And on that day, I'll actually go and buy something, or maybe we'll make something. Actually, tomorrow, my daughter's talking about making a chocolate covered raspberry cheesecake.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Right? So we'll allow for that. But otherwise, like we'll probably have that tomorrow. Maybe there's a little bit left Sunday. Maybe my son takes it back to college with him. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's not going to sit around during the week because I know it's a temptation for me.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great recommendation.
Yep. And that's exactly what I do. So I don't have my snacks in the house, but I do allow myself, if I'm out, we want to get ice cream or something like that, I can have those treats outside the home.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I keep that balance. So that I think me adopting it that way has allowed that balance.
Yeah.
So that I'm not just, consistently, constricting myself.
Yeah, because going to, as much as you and I enjoy extremes, going to extremes, particularly when it comes to diet, it tends to have this kind of rubber band effect, right? Like we go and we're awesome, we're doing great, and then we rebound from that, and then we go hard the other way and kind of screw ourselves over.
It's all about that balance.
Yes. Okay, all right. So snacking versus meals, focus on healthy meals. What's the next big idea?
So for me personally, again, going back to knowing your body. So I know for me, my body is optimized and just works better on a lower carb diet. You kind of mentioned it earlier.
Sure.
So I know my body is just sensitive to it. The carbs will just sit on me. So I'm very cautious to, I can't have carbs with every meal. So it might be, I may have the oatmeal in the morning. I may do a carb for lunch, along with my protein and veggies, because I pretty much have that consistently throughout the day. And then for dinner, I may take that carb out.
Yeah.
Or if I know, it's been a week where I've been doing the most and having a little bit more carbs with all of my meals, that next week I'm coming in and I may take that carb out for lunch so that I only have it during that breakfast meal. So just once again, being aware to how my body works, knowing that I'm very carb sensitive and kind of playing with where I put that in terms of my meals.
That's really good too. And it can take a little bit of time, but I think being intentional about it. I personally, and I'd love to get your take on this, but I personally use an app called MyFitnessPal. And I've been using it for years to track calories. I personally, and I know it's not for everybody, but I personally function really well within structure. So when I see, when I have a certain calorie goal and a macro goal, and I can see those numbers, I function well within that. So I found that helpful. But the cool thing about tracking calories is I become highly aware of what I'm eating. And I can certainly see an effect. And it's interesting because it really can vary from person to person. I actually grew up in Japan and we ate a good bit of rice because of it. And my body actually processes rice beautifully. Like I can go have sushi, for example, and I'm not going to get bloated as a result because my body just processes it. I'm wondering if it's because I adapted to it, basically, having grown up eating lots of rice. So those things are going to vary from person to person. Experimenting with and then tracking the results, even if it's just jotting a note down or getting Evernote out or whatever it is, figuring out what works best. It's super helpful. I've actually transitioned recently to I've eaten a relatively high fat diet. Nuts, like you were talking about, and avocado, olives, and eggs, and these kinds of things for some time. But I've recently upped that a little bit as far as the ratios, and my body's responding so well to it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So experimenting, seeing what works, what doesn't work, making adjustments, a huge deal. One thing I want to throw out, and like everything else we're talking about, would love your take on this, Jamenda, but I would encourage anybody listening in that if you are going to have carbohydrates of some kind, or at least a heavy dose of them anyway, do so post-workout. So if you're going to have some ice cream that day, you're going to have some pie, you're going to have cookies, whatever it is, awesome. But do so after you go put in a pretty good workout. And the reason for that, your insulin sensitivity pops up and your body's able to process the incoming carbohydrates a little bit more effectively. The reality is most of us, because we're photography business owners, we're sitting in front of a computer on our phone all day, and our body is primed or not primed really to take in all this excess carbohydrate. It's not using it as effectively for energy, and then we pile more on top of it, and we're messing ourselves up. So if you're going to take in a good bit, make sure of carbohydrate, make sure you get out, get a really good workout in on a day that you're going to take in those carbs.
Yep. Give your body something to do with those carbs that you put in it.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
And you put it way more eloquently. That's brilliant. Okay. All right. So focus on healthy meals versus snacking. Number two, be aware of what works well for your body. I think that's really, really important. And take us to the next point.
Cheat meals. So you alluded to it earlier.
Yeah.
But going back to that balance again, I think I learned more than anything else while I was bodybuilding. You stay in that deficit, you stay restricted, leading up to your show. And then after the show, like you said, you kind of rubber band and you're like, I can have all of the things right now. I'm going to eat. And so I did that. And so then I had to come back to a place of being like, I can't eat like this all the time. You put all that work in. Now let's find that balance. So on the weekends, I do allow myself that grace to go and have the pizza, the ice cream, the things that I like, knowing that I'm going to put that work back in. Now, if I know that I haven't been working out as consistently or something, has messed my schedule up, so I'm not in that same flow, I may restrict the types and ways that I have that cheat meal. So it may be a cheat day, a cheat meal, or just a cheat thing that I have. So there's different ways to kind of think about it in that space. Yeah. But just kind of giving yourself that grace to have that little something to kind of keep you going so you don't always feel so restricted.
Yeah. Yes. That's great. You summed it up beautifully. I think one of the things I've been kind of guilty of is on my so-called cheat day, just going like full ham crazy and really to an unhealthy extent. And so having some kind of balance for what I've realized as of late, having made some changes to the way that I'm eating on a regular basis, what I found is a midweek kind of refeed, to borrow a workout or a bodybuilding term, where I'm eating a bit of extra calories, and certainly not necessarily like quote bad calories, not just piling carbs, but just having some extra calories midweek because I'm keeping myself super lean for the majority of the week. Having a little bit of extra calories on the midweek is a nice way to balance myself out. And then on my cheat day used to be Sunday. Now I've changed it to Saturday because I'm playing soccer on Sunday. I certainly don't want to be super heavy or eating a really heavy meal late in the day on Sunday. So Saturday becomes that day. I can go a little crazy on Saturday, but that's a kind of a good way to balance it out through the week. And it's not just one day. Do you follow the Rock on Instagram at all?
I might. I feel like his posts may have gotten lost in my timeline.
Okay, sure.
But yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is he has these brilliant. I mean, we all know how jacked The Rock is, but he does these cheat meals and just like goes.
They're insane.
It's great, like piles of sushi and then like a plate of cookies with peanut butter and all this. I mean, it's hilarious and I love it all at the same time.
Yeah, it's really great to watch people do that. I cannot. If I have that day, I need to be in the gym the next 3 days straight doing all the cardio, to try and burn that off. So I am completely envious of people who can take in that much. But I think over time, because he's gotten his body up to a certain extent, his metabolism just knows what to do with it. Yep. So he's so lucky.
All right. So cheat meals. What's the next big idea or principle?
I think the other part is hydration. So being very aware of how much water I'm taking a day, and just staying on top of that on a consistent basis is really huge, especially after I've had those cheat meals. Having that water there to kind of flush my system out it is really important. And then just in general, hydration, people really take for granted, I think, how much water you need per day. I know when I'm training for a show, I'm getting in maybe a gallon. If I'm not training for a show, I try to get in at least, a half gallon, at least 4 to 6, if it's just, the regular bottles of water. I'm trying to get that in throughout the day just to make sure I'm keeping my system flushed, I'm staying hydrated, and I'm supporting my overall health. So
I'm really curious about this because this is again how much of a nerd I am about this stuff, but not very long ago, I actually searched on Google a couple of times, something to the effect of why do bodybuilders drink so much water? Because you go to the gym and you'll see them literally with the gallon jugs. Yep. I guess at a super, super basic level, I understand the significance of hydration. If for no other reason, then it, to your point, it helps keep our body flushed, our digestive system running. Outside of that, though, what is the significance of so much water, especially in the context of kind of building muscle?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that, the bodybuilders and their jugs. The other reason they do that is there's a couple different types of practices that people use leading into their bodybuilding shows to help their bodies look more conditioned, more ripped, more muscular in a sense. Okay. So one of those is water loading leading up to a show. And so you're intaking all this water, and maybe a week before your show, you start decreasing that amount. And what it does is your body, first off, putting that much water in your body's going to feel attacked in a sense. It's going to go into protective mode. And it's going to start flushing it out.
Okay.
If you've done that over, say, a month or two period of time where you're constantly overloading it with that water, once you start taking it away in that small, short span of time, the body hasn't realized that. So it's going to continue to flush out the liquids. Yep. Leading into your show day, you're going to look more ripped. You're going to look more, unfortunately, dehydrated, but it's going to give you a better looking physique once you step on stage.
Because you're just dropping all that water weight.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So that's one of the little tricks that they use to kind of get up there as they're prepping for shows and stuff.
But outside of that, though, I mean, would you say digestion, strong function of the musculature? I mean, are there any other particular benefits to drinking so much water?
Yeah, so flexibility is another thing. So that water helps to kind of keep those joints. I don't want to use the word lubricated, but essentially lubricated.
Okay.
As you're, trying to make sure that you're, able to lift. Having that water there is just really important to that overall, routine that you're doing.
All right. Okay. So hydration is the fourth big idea. Take us to the last one here.
And then the last one I would think is just to kind of give yourself grace when you fall off. Okay. Because it happens.
Sure.
And I think that's so easy. It's so easy for us to just say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I've fallen so far. But to just, hey, I'm going to take the next step at a time. And what can I do to kind of get better as I'm kind of on this journey to eat better and healthier?
That's good.
So I think more than... Mm-hmm.
No, that's good. And I honestly, I think it's something I need to do a better job of too, because I'm pretty hard on myself. But the other thing though, what do you think about, because where I would push back in this regard is I would also want to encourage our listeners, and I would want myself to do this. And I do this, I work at doing this, to understand why it is that I quote fell off, right? Like if I go, for example, food, binging particularly on high sugar foods has been an issue for me in the past. Mm-hmm. And the question for me is, okay, what is it that why is the underlying reason, right, or what is the underlying reason, and more specifically the psychological reason or reasons for my behavior, which is obviously trying to compensate for something, right? I right. want those feel good hormones to kick in as a result of this sugar, because I know it's going to feel good and I get this immediate gratification. There are a number of things going on there, but what is the psychology underlying that? Why am I doing that thing? Because I get falling off every once in a while, but if we see that becomes a cycle, whether it's once a week or once a month, I would wonder why, and continuing to repeat that and quote, just giving ourselves grace in that rather than kind of getting to the root of the issue, I think might be a bit problematic. What do you think about that?
So I think, and that's, I mentioned the book, The Power of Habit earlier. Yeah. And I think that's why that book constantly comes up for me, because I find myself in those loops where I'm like, I just want the sugar. That's all I want. And I keep going back to that. Sure. But it helps me then to, again, be aware of, is there something triggering why I'm doing this? Is it just that it's in the house? Okay. Is it that, I am not getting enough food, period? Do I need to make some other adjustment in my lifestyle and my routine so that I'm not just going for the easy thing or going for the sugar? But to your point, what is it that's triggering that? And then how can I set up, I want to say the safeguards to keep me from doing that? What do I need to do to then get back on track? And that's where that Power of Habit book kind of comes up. It comes back to mind for me when I start thinking about how to break that habit and break that falling off routine that I've kind of gotten into. Okay, good stuff. Before we go, and you've been super gracious, because speaking of grace, this is a longer interview than normal, but it's been this has been so practical and actionable and tangible and helpful, because, while yes, we all need to learn to use our camera better, or, take care of workflow and this kind of stuff, our health at the end of the day, it literally affects every single bit of our life, including our photography business. So I'm so glad that we get to spend some time on this. The last thing, supplementation. I know that, there are a million different possible supplements that we could go out there and take. And if we've ever started exploring that, then we'll likely start to see ads for this thing and that thing. Yeah. Where do you recommend, just at a very base level, anyone goes when it comes to supplementation, if at all? Yeah. So I think for me, I try to keep it pretty simple when I'm in off season, right? So the multivitamin, keeping it there as one of the first things. I do fish oil just to help with blood flow and things like that. So that's a really big one for me. Right now, we know we're in the middle of a pandemic. So anything additional that I can do to help my immune system, whether that's vitamin C or what is the other one? I want to say blackberry. The elderberry.
Okay.
Is another great one, just for the times that we're living in. And then if you are doing any type of, extreme activity or, lifting, that type of thing, a glutamine or something to help with recovery.
Okay.
Is a really big one that I'd say to add into that as well. And then the other thing to think about when you are choosing your supplements or thinking about them is to make sure that you're choosing one that has like the least amount of ingredients on the back. And that's something that I was told from like a vitamin shop employee.
Sure. But
you want the ones that have like the purest form of the supplement that you're trying to take versus the ones that are encapsulated in other things and your body's having to break down all that extra stuff to get to what you want. You want to be able to put the purest form of it in your body. So just another little tip there.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because I mean, there are so many different. I mean, this holds true certainly with food, especially packaged food. I guess I should specify, but also when it comes to supplementation. I mean, even if you look at you go to Walmart, for example, and look at the vitamin aisle, the multivitamin aisle, and especially you get into the kids stuff, and these gummy vitamins and this kind of thing. Right. The amount of sugar. Yes. That you can find in your in your vitamins is mind blowing. Like this isn't supposed to be candy, right? And in fact, you're trying to, I thought, counteract the potential harmful effects of whatever you might have run into in your existence as a human being, not taking more of it in. So there's certainly some irony there. I personally currently use Thorne multivitamins. So it's spelled THORNE. .com. It seems, and of course, there's only so much we can know, but it seems at the end of the day, based on what I've seen, heard, read, that Thorne is a reputable company as far as the efficacy, their processes when it comes to developing this vitamin. And so, if I was going to recommend one to anyone, especially a multivitamin, because you're taking in a broad kind of spectrum of supplements all at once. That would be the one that I would recommend. The other thing too that I'd recommend, and I don't know have you ever done this, Jamenda, where you go get a detailed blood panel that goes beyond just like the basic physical, but a blood panel that gives you kind of all the important biomarkers? Yep.
So I've never done that before, but I definitely think it's helpful. Once again, just in the vein of knowing your body, knowing what you're deficient of and what you need, I definitely recommend it as well. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it's something that made a really big, it was eye-opening for me. And this happened a number of years ago when I first had it done. But I went to an office outside of Atlanta, actually, and had a super detailed, I mean, we're talking like 7-8 pages long, the information that I got back. But to take us back to our original point of conversation here before I close, it allowed me to treat my body objectively, or to make decisions objectively about my body, where I could say, hey, I'm legitimately deficient, for example, in vitamin D, or I'm low in B12. And so it makes more sense to intentionally, target supplement, if you will, to take extra of this particular supplement or that particular supplement for the sake of compensating for an obvious shortcoming. And then to be able to go back later on and test again, or to test on a regular basis to make sure that you're keeping those numbers where they need to be is really, really important. I can't recommend enough for all our listeners. Don't let this just become a feelings-based thing, because you'll end up likely going down the wrong path in many cases. Use the data. We should do so certainly as business owners, like we were talking about. But it's important to do that as well when it comes to proactively taking care of ourselves, taking care of our health. That's really, really important. So my suggestion to those of you listening in would be to find a resource that would enable you to be able to go get those tests done. And, it's funny, I was actually, here it is. Okay. I was trying to pull up a resource, or at least suggest one in this regard. If you go to WellnessFX, the letters FX, wellnessfx.com. I will say this is pricey. There are other ways you can get this done that won't be as expensive. This was a less complicated recommendation to make. But if you go to wellnessfx.com, there is a resource there that you can take advantage of, which is a very user-friendly way to get blood work done, to look at look at certain biomarkers, have a baseline, know what it is that you need to work on. That would be something that I'd highly recommend. Now, to be clear, I haven't personally used that particular service, but when I'm looking for certain markers, there aren't a lot of solutions like this, or at least obvious solutions out there. This seems to be one of the best options. So whether it's that or something comparable, for those of you listening in, go check it out. And this might help you in your road to health. In addition to all the wonderful information, Jamenda, you've shared today. And I again, thank you for being so gracious, staying on a little bit extra time and
no
helping all of us out with this information. Will you remind our listeners one more time where they can find you online, follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so my Instagram, Facebook, and website are all jgraced with the D photography. So you can find me on all those platforms currently.
Perfect. And we'll put all this in the show notes, including the very many talking points from today's show at bokehpodcast.com. Or if you're using a podcast app that has the show notes, of course, you can take advantage of those there as well. Thanks once again, Jamenda. This has been super fun.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. Make sure to visit our sponsors, photographersedit.com, custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and miilu.com, that's miilu.com, the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.